Good morning. Welcome everyone to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. We have a new board. It's almost a new year. We've got a lot on our agenda, but I'd like to first start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Good morning. I'm Kimberly Overman, the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. I'd like to welcome our new board members and thank those members that have been a member of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board that are choosing to stay on as an advisory capacity. Our new members are Sarah Combs. Sarah, thank you for being here. She represents our non-for-profit provider. Adam Harden with Hart, who is right here. Good, you made it. We both just ran from the Hart meeting, which will come up later in the agenda. David Hollis from the representing the Housing Finance Authority. Mayor Rick Lott, the city of Plant City, and he's not here today. So, yep.
Not here.
I'm not seeing him. Okay, great. And Cody Powell from the Planning Commission. Cody, thank you. Welcome, everyone. The reorganization resolution has allowed those with unexpired terms to stay on as non-voting members for the duration of their term. The Affordable Housing Advisory Board is limited by statute to a certain number of official voting members. But we do want to honor those that have served us. And currently, we have Catherine O'Donnelly and Elizabeth Strom, thank you very much, have chosen to stay on. We've not heard back from Chrissy Neves as of yet, but looking forward to hearing from her in the future. Those individuals are at-large residents of Hillsborough County, and Ms. Neves is a real estate professional that has served and honorably, and all of those that have served us over this time period. We really appreciate your efforts and your input. With that, I'd like to open the meeting to public comment. We have about 15 minutes allocated for anyone that would like to speak. You're welcome to come forward to the board. Anybody?
There's a sign-in sheet over there.
Oh, is there? Okay. Oh, great. Excellent. Excellent. So first we have Ernest Johnson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Ernest Johnson. I live at 2119 East Nedrow Road, a homeowner. But my wife also has a church. In the Affordable Housing Act, we need to address that based on the church, because we have people come to the church with their bags and buckets and they're homeless. Some of these people, most of these people are working, but they're still homeless. Some of those people just were removed from their home because it was caused burden to even own their home. So we're talking about telemarketers and the lowest income ladder strategy that we can attend to. These people have no alternative but homelessness, and that's a shame in this county. We're talking about tiny houses. We're talking about apartments and duplexes that people can get in despite their AMI of income and all of this stuff, because these people come to the church and we have very few solutions for them. You know, sometimes we go out of our pocket and, pay for a hotel room because a bunch of children with them and stuff like this. A lot of these people are still working. And they're still trying to pay for stuff that they can't even own, of houses they can't even live in, or cars that they're no longer paying for, but they have it. And we're looking for the Hope Housing Act to do something in that lowest stratosphere of housing needs, because it's critical. These people coming to the church and there's nothing, we give them addresses and phone numbers of the city, the housing initiative for the homeless, and this stuff is not working for them. And we're looking for a permanent, I'm talking about every year annually budget for people that can get off of this carousel of homelessness. And that's what we're looking for, the Hope Initiative. We believe in that. And I come here to support that because if it's not the Hope Initiative, some other initiative need to be created where the lowest level, the telemarketers, the McDonald's workers, or whatever these people can afford, they deserve a place to stay. These people are Americans. You understand what I'm saying? And we can't keep brushing the shoulder, passing the bucket, because when these people come to the church, it not only break my heart, I can't find a solution. My wife can't find a solution. The administrators can't find a solution because we don't have the purse strings or we don't have the political clout to do nothing for them. And it's getting worse now. They're coming not like once a month. They're coming every couple of days. They're beating on the church door. They're calling the number, and there's anything we can do for them. But I believe in the Hope Initiative. I believe in the housing situation in town. We'll get better because you're listening, and we appreciate that you're listening. And we appreciate that you're here doing something about it. But I'm saying it's critical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate it. Next is Ron Spoor. By the way, each of you have at least 3 minutes.
Good morning. Ron Spoor with Habitat for Humanity. I want to invite members of the board and the public to a couple upcoming Habitat for Humanity home dedications. We have many home dedications each year, but these two are special, so I want to mention them today. The first one is actually next Friday. We just set the date, Sarah. It's Friday the 13th. It's next Friday at 2 p.m., and that's right across from the UACDC Park on 138th Avenue. The county has provided home funding for 9 of the 10 homes that we're developing, and so we're dedicating the first of those 10 homes next Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. We welcome members of the public and the board to attend that. The second dedication is Thursday, December 19 at 5:30 p.m., a little candlelight ceremony for a home that we developed just to the west of University of Tampa on a small lot, just a 25-foot by 103-foot lot. We developed a two-bedroom, 1-bath, single-car garage home. It's just a 16-foot wide home and matches the architecture in that neighborhood. It's got a metal roof to match the architecture, and it's part of our Veterans Initiative. So it'll be a veteran family, a 2-person veteran family purchasing that home. So that's December 19, Thursday at 5:30, and that's 1327 West North B Street in Tampa, just to the west of the University of Tampa. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for the work you're doing. Appreciate it. Next is Sean Wilson.
Good morning, Sean Wilson, Blue Sky Communities, 5300 West Cypress Street. I want to talk about the 3 things. First of all, the HOPE plan. I've had a chance to read through the plan in detail. I actually had a chance to meet with some other stakeholders already, and hopefully we can provide some good commentary. I do want to agree with Mr. Johnson's general comment that the targeting should be at a much lower average income level. There should be more funding and more units targeted at the 50% AMI than what's currently shown, and hopefully I'll have some other additional constructive comments to be able to provide prior to the BOCC voting on December 18th. As many of you know, I'm also the chairman of the statewide advocacy coalition called the Coalition of Affordable Housing Providers. It's a coalition of 90 members. A lot of us are low-income housing tax credit developers and associated industries in that capacity. Up in Tallahassee every other week, meeting with leadership in both the State House and the Senate, urging them not to sweep Sadowski. And of course, we had a big early win, if you want to call it that, this year, in that the governor, for the second time in a row, recommended not sweeping, recommended full funding for Sadowski. So that's great. So, like I say, I'm sitting down with substantive meetings with the lobbyists, of course, with leadership. And hopefully they're gonna listen to us, and they're not gonna sweep Sadowski, which would mean a huge increase in SHIP funding for the county. So to the extent that we can coordinate with the county's lobbying efforts, I would welcome that opportunity. And I'll be there next week for 2 days doing that. Thirdly, I don't know if anybody saw this editorial at the very top of the editorial page in yesterday's paper, which is entitled "Affordable Housing Stays Out of Reach." And while the editorial board made a few interesting points, I think they missed the mark in some ways as well, and that's unfortunate. And And so I would urge everybody to read that and, maybe let your feelings be known to the editorial board. It would be nice if they were on the same page. I thought it was shocking and almost, did you see where they mentioned the Hope Affordable Housing Ordinance in here, Mr. Hedges? No, I couldn't believe they didn't even mention it, but they did talk about something that the city of Clearwater is doing. So, very strange. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. I agree. We need more cred, apparently. Char Lurch, please.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Shari Lurch, a board member of HOPE, the Hillsborough Organization for Progress and Equality. So over the past 6 years, HOPE has consistently asked the county to establish the Affordable Housing Fund of at least $10 million to create more decent housing, and the affordable for working families and seniors with very low incomes at 50% AMI and below. It was great this summer that the draft Affordable Housing Ordinance was brought forward. And during discussions to get the ordinance passed, we asked for at least half of the annual fund of $10 million to be used for the very low income. Yet the ordinance was passed, stating that no less than 30% will spend on housing for families with very low incomes. And this offered flexibility in spending, meaning 30 to 65% can be spent on this income level. Yet, as we feared, this flexibility has not increased the amount of funds in this proposed biennial plan, for it has only 30% or $3 million being spent on the very low income. We find this to be very disappointing. The ordinance and the biennial plan were given the name HOPE because of our hard work to get it established. Yet this biennial plan does not align with the vision and request of HOPE to meet the needs of the very low income. And while this plan only giving $3 million to the very low income, it proposes $1 million for moderate income families which have other funds available like SHIP. We understand this is a 2-year plan, so it can't do everything. Yet the county's HOPE Affordable Housing Act flexibility should help meet our community's greatest current needs by allowing more funds to be used for the very low income. It should also use proven strategies to get things done in a timely manner now. Therefore, we ask again that this 2-year biennial plan remove 10% of funding from the moderate income and put it towards having at least half of the approved affordable housing funds for the 2020-2021 budgets being used to create decent affordable housing for the very low income. Thank you.
Thank you, Char. Next is Gretchen DeSavio. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Good morning. I'm Gretchen Del Savio, and I'm a member of HOPE. HOPE is very disappointed that HOPE Affordable Housing Biennial Plan only puts 30% of the approved funds in the 2020 and 2021 budgets to meet the critical housing needs of families with very low incomes in our community. We ask you to change this proposed biennial plan so at least half of the funds are used for these families. We have at least 750,000 families with very low incomes who currently spend half their income just for housing. These families should be our priority with the first 2 years of the HOPE Affordable Housing Act. We also ask you to clarify parts of the biennial plan. First, regarding the tables on page 3. Funding for multifamily rental is at $3.5 million, or a projected 249 units. Yet funding for PERS and infill at $2 million is only for 18 units. So please define PERS and infill and explain why $2 million will only produce 18 units. Okay. Please let us know how the housing preservation is defined. We didn't see it explained in the strategy narrative starting on page 6. And how is innovative housing that uses 1 million defined? Is the plan suggesting that E, F, and G on pages 12 to 14 are innovative housing? Under priorities/preferences on page 15, it says that the county prioritizes its allocation of funds to meet the needs of the community, and that preferences for funding may be provided to projects that include serving households emerging from homelessness or with incomes below 50% AMI. If this is true, why limit the funds for the very low income to only 30% of the funds? Also, on the top of page 16, it says that the county is always seeking opportunities to develop new types of affordable housing and the innovative ways to increase affordability and livability, and that the county will consider an ongoing open for application process as long as funds are available based on minimum criteria, including minimum of 30% of the units in the development are for extremely low income, 30% AMI or below, and minimum of 30% of the units are for very low income, 50% AMI or below. Again, if this is true, if the county is always seeking opportunities for the very low income and extremely low income, why limit the funds for these families to 30% of the fund? We look forward to you clarifying these for us, and we ask that this biennial plan to use at least half of the funds to create more decent housing for the families with very low incomes at 50% AMI and below, and who are workers with low-paying jobs, people with disability, and seniors on fixed income who struggle to survive in this county.
Thank you. Next is Harry Hedges. You?
Signed the wrong sheet. No, I'll just make this brief. Working on the new mayor's team and going through the same issues and the same problems we're dealing with countywide, in this program, what we looked at, if you want to own a home, basically in the city of Tampa, with Habitat, with all of the stakeholders we have, there's a way to own a home. We had an individual say, I have someone that works at Burger King. They can't own a home. And Habitat said, we just put someone in that home. My point is, we need to do a better job letting the community know what our assets are, what our programs are, and how we are sensitive to the needs of our community. That is probably the candle we're keeping under the basket, because you have a lot of the stakeholders in this room that deal with homelessness, that deal with the lowest of income, and the people with special needs, housing. So it's not something that we should hide. It's something that we should share with the community, what we really have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That was the last signed up speaker. Are there any additional speakers? Okay, come on up, please.
I'm Brian Braley, and I'm with Hope also, and also with the United Church of Christ. And I just want to add a different perspective in addition to what has already been presented. When we first started coming here to talk about this 6 years ago, the response we had at that time was that nobody else is here. Where is the problem? And eventually, of course, that became better understood. But at the time, we wanted 100% for the people at 50% and below. We wanted 100%. Because this was the very underserved. The affordable housing that was done with federal funds and local funds, et cetera, was distributed in such a way that really not a lot got to this group. So our message was this group needs more attention. And so at this point, we'd be happy if we could get 50%. But we would urge you to look at this draft, because the draft doesn't really reflect much difference than what you would normally do with $10 million. And what we're saying is more needs to shift to this group, because they have been the forgotten group, and this is the group we've been speaking about for more than 5 years. So look at the plan and see if you can't shift those numbers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate the comments that were made today, and that's part of the reason why the biennial plan has a comment period. It is on the agenda a little bit further down the line, but I failed to allow everyone else to introduce themselves. So would you like to start? And then we'll get on with the rest.
My name is Luis Carrera. I'm at USDA Rural Development out of Champions Gate, Florida.
Great, thank you.
And I'm David Hollis, representing the Housing Finance Authority.
Adam Harden, Soho Capital. I'm here as the Hart Board representative.
Cody Powell with Powell Realty. I'm here representing the Planning Commission.
And Tina Fernandez, a member of the advisory board representing a citizen of Hillsborough County.
I'm Nancy Takamori with the County Attorney's Office.
Cheryl Howell, Affordable Housing Director.
Kimberly Overman, County Commissioner.
Mark Rosenwasser, Assistant. Assistant to the County Commissioner. That's actually not true.
There's some other role that you play.
Whatever.
We'll figure it out in a minute.
It's Monday after a long weekend.
Yes, exactly.
Orlando Goose, Tampa City Council, District 5.
Sherry Donahue, City of Temple Terrace.
Connie Burton, Community Activist.
Good morning, Sarah Combs, University Area CDC.
Elizabeth Strum, USF, but I'm here as a Hillsborough County resident.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for all of you for being here. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by Mary Helen Ferris. She's going to give us an update and basically an orientation for new members of the board. This board is actually mandated by Sunshine Law, and so we wanted to make sure that that's available. Is Mary Helen available? Yeah, we're going to give her a call and make sure that she is able to address it, so we'll come back to that shortly. There are minutes in your packet. For those of you that have had an opportunity to review them, I would like to entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
Great. All approved? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Chairman's report. I actually do have a report. We have most recently reorganized this board, as I mentioned. It's to accomplish much of what we heard today. Is a way of bringing an opportunity to make affordable housing at the county level more transparent, more available, and a way of communicating with our community what we're doing in the area of affordable housing. As the Board of County Commission has provided an additional $10 million to affordable housing annually, and as we advocate to protect the Sadowski Trust, which would have given us this year, or next year, or this year actually, almost $12 million we did not get, the county has stepped up to fill in the gap as much as we were able. If we're able to actively advocate for affordable housing with our state legislature, as well as encouraging the governor to continue pushing our legislators into a position of recognizing the economic opportunity and drag of not investing in affordable housing, but the jobs that are created by investing in affordable housing, and the policies that we put into place can actually help strengthen not only our communities, but our overall economy going forward. That plays into a part of our policies, and we have a couple of policies that we need to address that I'd like to bring forward, but we also need to address our bylaws. The bylaws for the Affordable Housing Committee were approved back in 2012, and there was a minor amendment done in 2015. As a result of the recent reorganization resolution and the new duties from the HOPE Affordable Housing Act, the bylaws are in need of being restated. In addition, it is my hope that we can start meeting monthly, that we move the dates to the second Monday of the month, as there are two members, as you may have noticed, the out-of-breath arrival. Two of the members here on this board are actually in a Hart board meeting that also has a robust agenda for 2/20 that is just prior to this meeting. And so I have provided in your backup a series of alternative dates that we could consider, which is part of our bylaws, about when we meet. Two things happen if we were to meet on a monthly basis. We could, one, make the meetings maybe a little shorter, because we could cover a lot more territory if we met on a monthly basis. Two, we can review those projects that are being presented to the Board of County Commission for presentation. And three, I won't walk in looking like I'm about to have a heart attack and sit at the desk. But more importantly, it does give us the flexibility of being able to have a robust discussion on the policies and how we implement not only the biennial plan, but also have discussions on how we can learn from other communities, how we can partner with our stakeholders, and what innovative ideas we can do to address not only our lowest income residents, but also those that are emerging out of homelessness. I think it's critically important that we recognize our partnership with THHI that addresses those that are homeless, but also those organizations that serve the homeless, and so that we're able to help those individuals move into a positive area. I have confirmed with county staff that this boardroom is available on each of the dates that are presented in your package, which would be, and I don't know if I need to list all of these, but for minutes, but January 13th, February 10th.
Tell me where those are, I'm sorry.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See them.
Okay, never mind. Here you go. Sorry. Thought they were passed out. My apologies. Okay, we'll just pass these out either way. Sorry about that. And if you can make sure our wonderful scribe here can actually get a copy too, that would be great. Basically, it's the second Monday instead of the first Monday of the month in general. We do have a couple of conflicts with some holidays that fall into place, but the proposed meeting dates for 2020, if the revisions to the bylaws, Article 3, Section 1, are to hold monthly board meetings, they would be January 13th, February 10th, March 9th, April 13th, May 11th, June 8th, July 13th, August 10th, September 14th, October 12th, November 9th, and December 14th. Basically, it's the second Monday. For those of you that have the great desire to watch the BOCC meetings and the MPO meetings and the EPC meetings, those are all the first week of the month, as well as the HART meeting. So I'm in board meeting week, as well as many of our other constituents. And so by moving it to the second Monday, unless there is a great conflict for those of you that have other roles, either on boards, on committees, or in real life, other than government service that you volunteer to do, I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt a bylaw amendment on Article 3, Section 1, to not only address monthly meetings so that we can have robust conversations, but also to have them on the second Monday as illustrated with the handout that I just passed out.
So moved.
Commissioner, just a point of order. Can you instead adjust your motion so that the vote is on adoption of the schedule? Because bylaw changes would take some prior advance written notice, but you could still adopt the schedule, and then we can go back and you can appoint a subcommittee to look at the bylaws and incorporate a monthly meeting into the bylaws. But in advance, you can adopt the schedule.
Oh, okay. All right. So the motion is to adopt the schedule for 2020.
Stipulate at the same time.
And we could entertain whether it could be at 9 or it could be 11. I'm
That was my
open for
question.
suggestions.
Would be the time.
Part of the conversation could be exactly that. I'm open to either time.
I'll move that we adopt the 2020 meetings dates, and I guess if we have a second, then we can discuss the time.
There's a second? Okay. Is there a preference for 9 o'clock? Show of hands. Okay. Is there a preference for 11 o'clock? Okay. I think 9 o'clock wins in this particular case. I do recognize getting here in rush hour time is challenging, but a lot of our board members are actually downtown, with the exception of Mayor Lotz. And oh, good. Thank you for joining us. And Ms. Donahue. A lot of us are here in the area.
Champions Gate.
And you're,
The gentleman who's coming in from Champions Gate.
right. Yeah, that's a little ways.
I reside in Hillsborough County, so it'll be a convenient hour for me to come instead of all the way from Champions Gate at 11 to come from Valrico over here at 9.
Oh,
and then
okay.
go to Champions Gate.
Okay. All right. Great. So, do we need
Well,
to?
I think the question then would be, of those who said 9 o'clock would be preferred, would 11 o'clock still be doable?
Either's doable, but we only had 2 raise their hands for 11.
I know, I'm just asking, maybe you should say, does it matter to those who said, I'd like to come at 9? Does it matter? It doesn't matter to me. I would be happy to stay at the 11, knowing that it is a real issue for a couple of people.
Okay. Are there members of the committee that would find that 9 o'clock would prohibit them from attending? I guess it's a better way to answer the question. Show of hands?
Okay.
Okay, great. So can I amend the motion to?
I'll amend my motion to adopt the 2020 meeting dates in the handout that's been provided to the board members, and for the meetings to occur at 9 a.m.
And the second? Okay. All approved?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and we'll put together a meeting for the bylaws adjustments on the other issues.
A subcommittee?
On a subcommittee to put together to address but the bylaws and any other amendments. And with that, I do have another issue that committee will need to address.
The same committee or a different committee?
I would suggest maybe it needs to be the same committee. The bylaws are in, as I mentioned, need of being updated. There's another item in the bylaw that does need to be updated that addresses the affordable housing policy regarding loan forgiveness, subordination, foreclosure, and restructuring. There is a policy that's used by Affordable Housing Services Department regarding loan forgiveness, subordination, foreclosure, and restructuring. And that's not unusual. You know, anybody that owns a place knows that sometimes it's in their advantage to actually restructure or refinance or do those things in order to make a project work. The policy was approved over 5 years ago. But due to its age, I would recommend that the staff review the document and make sure it's up to date with all applicable laws. In addition, I would welcome a cost-benefit analysis to make sure that this policy is fair to our valued partners and ultimately is a good deal for our tax-paying citizens. I think it's important that we review these periodically, and given it's been some time, a very different economic situation, I think we need to take a look at the particular language within that bylaw. Finally, if it's possible, I'd love to get a comparative analysis to see if it would be beneficial to see how other comparable counties address restructuring, loan forgiveness, any of those items that are under that section of our bylaws, especially those in Florida that are dealing with these issues. It's not uncommon that we need a restructuring, but in order to make sure that our affordable housing dollars are best spent in creating new housing for those new dollars, how we handle established projects and the restructuring also is an important part of this board's guidance and recommendations that we make to the Board of County Commissions on those restructuring or those approvals that come before the BOCC board. So I'd like to include that as part of the bylaws review and ask staff to assist us on those specific issues.
Sure. That can be part of the same subcommittee if you want to request folks who might want to serve on the subcommittee.
Okay. And with that, are there any volunteers for serving? 2? 3? Anyone else? Oh, that's right, Louis. I'm not sure you can serve because you're not a voting member, or can he?
We would need, it'd be desirable to have at least 3 voting members.
Yeah, I would say I need one more voting member. Connie and Councilman Goods,
Connie, Councilman.
Ms. Burton. Okay.
Thank you.
Got it?
Yep.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very
We
much.
would certainly invite non-voting members to participate and offer their knowledge as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I see that Ms. Ferris is here. Would you like to come forward and?
My name is Mary Helen Ferris. I'm Deputy County Attorney. I've been with the office almost 28 years now, and a big part of my practice is open government law, both sunshine law, which is your open meetings law, and public records. So I'd like to take just a few minutes and go over the sunshine law, the few key points of it. Certainly, as you deliberate and go through your process, if there's any questions that come up, Nancy and I live right down the hall from each other, so we can always, confer. What is a sunshine law? It's all meetings of any board, commission, or council at which official acts are to be taken are declared to be open to the public at all times, and written minutes must be taken. So what is a meeting of the sunshine law? Obviously, it's a meeting such as this. But the Attorney General has said any gathering of 2 or more members of the same board or committee that discussed anything that might come back to that committee for action can only be done at a noticed meeting. So it would include subcommittees that you were just talking about. And this day and age, the big thing is the explosion of social media. It is so easy now for people to communicate through Facebook and Twitter and all of these platforms. And you need to be careful that you don't put something on a Facebook that another member of this board could reply to, and then you might have an unintentional violation of the sunshine law. So be very careful. The basic 3 requirements is that it's open to the public. This would prohibit meeting in a private country club, for instance, or something that the public cannot go to. It would also prohibit voting by secret ballot, because the public is not allowed to see that. Reasonable notice must be given, and written minutes must be taken. A lot of times, I see boards that will tape record their meetings, which is fine to do, but the sunshine law actually requires that minutes be written down. Again, when I was talking about what else is subject, phone calls, letters that go back and forth. There was a case out of Central Florida. It was a school district case where the school board was going to decide on a very controversial redistricting of school lines. So the superintendent went from office to office to office of the school board members and basically brokered a deal. So when the school board walked out to a packed room, it was just a quick vote. And somebody thought that was a little fishy, and so that was found to be a violation of the sunshine law, because in that case, they specifically used the supervisor to broker the deal. Obviously, the county administrator, the county attorney briefed the commissioners before the Wednesday board meetings, which there's nothing wrong with that because it's not 2 members of the same board. But they know better than to say, okay, this commissioner's going to vote for this if you vote for that, and that kind of thing. And let me know if you have any questions as I go through. How about member of different boards? There would be no prohibition for a county commissioner to have a private meeting with a city council person. But in our county, there's a lot of boards, aviation, sports, port, where you might have a county commissioner and a city council person. So the same restriction would apply to them. If it was a port authority, they couldn't discuss anything that might reasonably come back to the port authority for business. Your charge here, unlike the Board of County Commissioners, and they tackle such a wide variety of issues, it's really something to see. But this board has a little bit more focused. So if 2 members of this board wanted to talk about the Buccaneers or social events like that, that's fine, as long as you don't discuss something that might come back to this board for action. I get asked about social events. There's no prohibition about that either, as long as there's no discussions between 2 board members on issues that have to do with affordable housing. This comes up every now and then if you wanted to take a bus tour, maybe of an affordable housing project. Years ago, when the resource recovery plant was open, the county commissioners at the time wanted to go tour it. So what we did is we provided notice. We provided ample room for people who were interested in media to go along, and written minutes were taken of the discussions that they had. Does Sunshine Law require that an agenda be written? No, it doesn't. The notice just has to be reasonable time, date, place, subject matter. People hate it when the lawyer says reasonable because that depends on the circumstances. There was a bill a couple of sessions ago that would prohibit a Sunshine Law board from discussing anything that's not on the printed agenda. Luckily, that did not go anywhere because, as you know very well, the public comment, it's a long 3 minutes sometimes, but people bring up stuff and maybe the board wants to act on it. So you can act on things that are not on the agenda. Now the public has a right to participate. That was put on the books in 2013. And a good example of how you can do that in conformance with the laws is how the commissioners do it. You set aside a time. You can say 3 minutes a person. You can differentiate between matters that are on the agenda and matters that are not. But that is actually in the law. Previous to that, the public had no right to participate. I mentioned notice. You've got ample staff here that's going to do the notice, make sure you're in a public building. But again, it's got to be reasonable. And my example that I use, an extreme example, is I was pulling into this building on 911. And when I got up to my office and I had heard on the radio what was going on, and the county attorney at the time called me down there and said the board wants to meet in 15 minutes. So we contacted our communications that had like a blast thing, and the sheriff came because they were going to decide whether or not to close the building. And obviously that's an extreme, but that was reasonable under the circumstances. So that's basically it in a nutshell. As you go forward, if there's any questions that come up, let me know. I'd be happy to answer those and provide guidance. Does anybody have any questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ferris, thank you very, very much. I just want to encourage any of the board members, Ms. Ferris is a wealth of knowledge. So if you're not sure, please ask, because she's very available to answer your questions. And as she mentioned earlier, the social media is a bit of a challenge. You know, we all like each other, so, you know, and so we tag each other a lot when we go to these various different events. So we are going to have to be very diligent about when we get together, but also remembering that it is, the key is, you know, if it should come in front of the board and for a vote, and we need to make sure that we're very diligent at that and let our good works shine. So thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it. Next on the agenda is the Schimberg Agreement.
That agreement is underway, and we are in the preliminary stage right now. What that agreement will do is provide for us a baseline of numbers, not the general numbers that's populated typically in the study, but it would be specific to our neighborhoods.
Okay, and that'll cost you $10.
It'll be specific to our neighborhoods and the specific needs of Hillsborough County. So we look forward to seeing those numbers. And I'm thinking 60, no later than 90 days, we will see those numbers from Mr. Odell.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the biennial. Oh, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So would that be pretty much like a census tract, kind of like document to tell us like income level? You know, I'm just trying to figure out what type of reporting this would be.
Right, it would give us all of the demographics. So they would be looking at education, housing, housing stability, vulnerability indices, different neighborhoods that we may not be readily aware of that may have a high need for people that are overhoused. And so it would provide an incredible amount of information for us to be able to use. So not just the general information that we get from the Florida Housing Data Clearinghouse.
Do you know how they're defining neighborhoods? Are you giving them definitions of neighborhoods and then they're making the data work within those, or are they creating neighborhood definitions in some other way? And also, do the data include incorporated cities, and so the whole county, or is it just unincorporated Hillsborough?
No, it's the entire county. So we need to do this collaboratively. And so we are sharing information back and forth because this is a document that we really need to be able to utilize, not just numbers on a page. And so the neighborhoods are how we want to really define the neighborhoods or the regions or the areas of interest, the areas of opportunities, the areas where there's transit, the areas of growth, the areas where people are being, I want to say, almost pushed out of. So some of those areas as well.
Let me ask you, how often, because to me, we don't have what I call a mesh with everybody, it seems like, and I think that's the problem in the county, that we're not all on the same page at times. And that's why we don't get the best results. How often do you, our city person meets, Temple Terrace and Plant City, come together to form a plan or looking to see who has the best plan or where are we going? Or the best practices?
Well, I want to say that probably depends on what you're trying to do. But in terms of housing, I want to say that I communicate with the City of Tampa's personnel often. Now, the City of Temple Terrace and the City of Plant City are our urban county partners. And so we work collaboratively with them on projects each and every year based on what they feel the need is for their communities.
And again, that's why I think maybe the crack is that we're not all together bonded as one to help all of the citizens of Hillsborough County, regardless of the city of Tampa, Plant City, or Temple Terrace. I think maybe it needs a discussion with elected officials in the future to look at how we are all on one page and accord with the same processes. Because if you got a process here and a process there, people jump all around. And that's where you don't get the communication doesn't come in. The gentleman talked about the assets. Well, people don't know what the assets are because they're all over the place, and then you got county saying one thing, you got city saying one thing, Temple Terrace saying one thing. So I think it needs to be a collective bond of everyone giving the same message, making sure that the resources of the same type are in all communities so people can know where to go, how to find them. Because sometimes when I'm out there, people just don't know to know. And that's when I look at this plan here, I think it's a good start, but for me, when I drive the city and the county, I look at all of these abandoned homes, lots, and my focus, I think, to me, and should be a valid point to all of us, is to look at putting more money towards rehab as well to keep that stock in house. And I think we're everyone's not ready to be a homeowner.
Right.
You can work at McDonald's, you can work anywhere. But some people are not ready for that responsibility of being homeowners. And so we have to look at those, it's a plate for everyone, but I think we have to look, especially with our county commissioners and our elected bodies, to say we have to be focused on one page so we're all doing the same type of model so people don't have to wonder, well, I go here, I go there. Well, why does the county do that and the city doesn't do that? And it makes a bad balance. So I just think in the future we need to look at those opportunities to all come together as one, and also, secondly, look at strengthening the assets we have in the given communities with more money focused on rehab, that you have a market that's already there, but we're not tapping it. We're just letting it go.
Councilman Goods, that is exactly why we reorganized the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. Is to get all the stakeholders with leadership responsibilities at the table to discuss these particular items. What's nice, what's effective about the Schimberg analysis and how it might fit into an equity profile, because they've helped build an equity profile over in Pinellas with a variety of stakeholders to identify just exactly what you described. Where are our assets? Where are our resources? And how do we move forward collaboratively with where government partners with private enterprise and nonprofit to serve the goal? Because when we do that and we do it well, it can happen. It's another reason why I had made a recommendation and we've approved having a monthly meeting rather than bi-monthly meeting. There's a lot on our plate. And every one of the organizations that are now sitting at the table have a lot going on. So this is one way that we can make sure we're staying abreast of what each of our representative organizations are doing, and where we could possibly collaborate on doing a joint workshop, for example, with what the city is doing in its housing area, which is amazing, by the way. There's a lot of work that's being done in each of our representative stake places. And one of the reasons this board ended up being reorganized in the manner of which it has is to offer that as an opportunity to entertain that dialogue and to get the work done, not only at the county level, but also in a representative municipalities, as well as in the industries that are important in getting this job done. Partnering with the Housing Finance Authority, with the Tampa Housing Authority, with all of the different agencies that are serving this goal is an important part of this process. It gives us the time to get our staff reports and monitoring reports done. The county staff is going to bring what we're doing at a county level, but that doesn't preclude us from asking each of you or offering an opportunity for each of you to bring what your staff is doing in an area that is special and awesome and great, that we need to learn, what's going on and how we can work together. So I appreciate that. I truly do, and that's part of the reason why this board is being reorganized the way it is. Ms. Burton?
I want to say, in the report, what I would like to see a real strong focus on is how gentrification has impacted communities. And I am in full research, at the height of the civil rights movement, we have seen gentrification just plunge into our communities in ways in which the most vulnerable populations that is always seen to be on the table for discussion is not of benefit, whether it is the city or the county or even some charitable organizations. And so I want to see how this county, I live in the city, and I see how the city is moving in my opinion, in a way in which it is not taking on that issues serious, but is attempting to bring in character and a new class of people in communities that was once occupied by very low-income communities. So that's what I want to see. I want to see if this county has the ability to have some type of moral courage to stop this onslaught that is happening in the vision of redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly comment on the reorganization. So I love that all the stakeholders and the people that are making the decisions are now at the table, but something that I see that might be missing, maybe not at the moment because I'm here, is the frontline people who are actually working with these individuals that are looking for this housing. So I'm here right now, I'm an agent, I'm a realtor, and I work with low income. A lot of us don't. I think it's because there's a lack of education and awareness around it and how we can help them. So keeping someone here, maybe a realtor, maybe not, maybe someone from the county, just someone that's here working frontline with those individuals, I think is important to keep in mind, whether they're voting or not voting, just that they're here and they can offer guidance. And she brings up the changing neighborhoods. I know what she's talking about. I know what developments are there. I know who's moving where because I'm helping them do it. So it's just, I think, something important to keep in mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, it sounds like what we're looking for is an ombudsman who will work with a large group and bring all the information to one central location. I know that we are the affordable housing industry in this room. We represent them. But I know that, for instance, the nursing homes and the hospitals and all of the other health and welfare organizations have an ombudsman organization to facilitate all of that information. So somebody has a primary place to call. If somebody calls the county, they can say, call this number. If somebody calls the city, they can say, call this number. And it's the same number to a person who is a central receiving point for all of the information, so that it then behooves all of the participating parties to provide the information to that ombudsman, so that we actually have somebody who is there and being able to answer the kind of questions like Ms. Burton suggested. We, like every other city, and I just got back from some vacations, I'm visiting my kids in various places. The gentrification is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And we've got to figure out a way to solve that issue, particularly for those in the 30% and less category. So
That came up before, and we established that the place that they were to call is the crisis
211
center. Is that correct? Or the crisis line?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
So if I,
But I want to say, you may want to consider whether or not that is the most appropriate place for,
no, I was
for
just
people
going
to
to
reach
say,
out.
if I was, let's say I'm a teacher and I'm struggling to pay my rent, is it ever going to cross my mind to call the crisis line? No.
no, I would think of the crisis line as more of a personal health
Yeah.
and well-being type of situation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we need a 211 for housing, you know? Or something along those lines. And so I think it's an excellent suggestion that we find a way of, whether it be an on-site website, sort of funneling way of gathering information with a way of making more transparency in terms of where to find information. And I think that honestly we can get there. I think it's an excellent selection or suggestion that we work on doing that. Part of the reason, this reason we're doing as much as we're doing, and now that we live under sunshine, you know, we're going to be providing more information. Our information that's within our agendas will be more available. Our meetings are now televised, so people can hear and watch these meetings to be able to learn in the event they're not able to attend. So we're going to get there. I think we're going to get there. It's definitely on my agenda. So I appreciate it. And I do think having greater transparency and more availability of information about where to go and how to get help is important. I think it's also important that we define gentrification, because there's two things. Making a neighborhood better is considered gentrification. Displacing, on the other hand, is not the goal. And so in how we adopt policies and work with our partners, I think it's going to be important that we pay attention to what happens when a community gets better, is more attractive. Your kids can play in the street without being run over. You know, those things are positive things. Keeping trees in our community, those are positive things, and they help add value to our communities. Having communities that now have transit in the area increases the value of those properties. But we have to find ways that we adopt policies that allow those communities that have been there and established for a long period of time to be able to stay in the community. To address, I think, what I hear you saying, Ms. Burton, is it's great to make neighborhoods better, but it doesn't mean kick everybody that's in it out so that someone else can move in. So gentrification is twofold. It is making things better, but also providing ways that we can adopt policies to maintain those communities as we need to. Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on having a central location for people to call. I think that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, because I see families on a regular basis coming in looking for housing. There's no housing. That's the challenge. So I pose to this board to really look at how we can think outside of the box to really be able to provide opportunities for housing, because there's just, we're in a crisis. There's not enough for the families that live here. And so before we start to talk about all of these, resources and whatnot, we've got to find the product to hit the street to be able to make an opportunity for the families who are coming in. So I think that that would be a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to look at when we have housing stock available to be able to give them that. So I just am looking forward to being on this board and kind of thinking outside of the box and how we can really address displacement in a way that, maybe we haven't looked at before, and providing ways to be able to really look at residents and see them for their strengths and not their weaknesses, and be able to wrap services and approaches around them to be able to get them to be able to be homeowners, to have the American dream. And I think that it's possible, but we have got to think outside of the box. And so I just challenge this board to really do that and to think innovatively. And, it might not be easy for us to kind of change the way that we've been thinking and looking at attainable housing, but I think that that's what we're being called to do by the public, by the families, and, by the stakeholders in these communities that we're serving. So I'm really excited to be on this board, and I really am going to challenge everyone to kind of think outside of the box and how we deliver services and how we can increase housing in the communities that we're working in.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Powell? Can you pull your mic a little closer to you, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the Schimberg agreement, when was the last time that the data that we're going to be getting, how old is it, that information we're trying to get updated?
No, this is going to be brand new data for Hillsborough County. So they do a housing study. I want to say it's every couple of years, but for Hillsborough County, this is going to be brand new data.
Okay, because my thought was, is there a way that we have some sort of annual contract, or where we're getting maybe this information and data more regularly? I don't know how long we contract out with them to receive, this data. So, if we have the data more readily available and it's updated, annually or, whatever, so then that way we're not having to wait sometimes 60 to 90 days to make very important decisions, because 60 to 90 days, is a long time for someone who may be displaced, or we can make a decision on something that, down the line is going to impact someone.
I think it would be a good idea that this would ride along with the biennial plan, really, to get that kind of updated data that's specific for Hillsborough County. So, great suggestion.
Just one more question about the Schimberg agreement. What's the scope of work for that agreement? I mean, because we have another suggestion that's come up from Ms. Burton for gentrification to be included, but I don't know the scope of work that's currently being covered by the agreement. To know if this will be included, can it be added to the scope of work? I did hear a report coming in 60 to 90 days, but I don't want to have the misrepresentation or expectation that it's going to include this body of work when it's not already outlined for inclusion.
Right. So I don't have the agreement in front of me right now to specifically spell out the scope of work for you, Ms. Fernandez. But what I can say to you is that we're in the early stages. I want to say this was completed by procurement about 8 days ago, and I was out last week. So we're in the very early stages of moving forward with this. And we have some options at this stage, and so I did want to bring it back to the AHEB board as soon as possible for discussion. So we will certainly try to be inclusive in our approach to getting our demographics and getting our numbers, so that we can take this information and build a full affordable housing report that'll really serve as a tool for this board and for our community as well.
Is it possible to actually circulate the agreement before it gets approved by the board next month?
Because this agreement is only a $20,000 agreement, It doesn't necessarily go back to the Board of County. Or, no, I apologize. It does. I requested that it go back to the Board of County Commissioners.
That's why I asked. I was like,
In that
wait,
case,
I think so.
It would not have, not necessarily, but I requested that it go back to the Board of County Commissioners because I wanted to keep it on the radar.
Okay, all right. So would you be willing to circulate the agreement?
Absolutely.
So we could see a scope?
Yes, sir.
And maybe provide comment before it gets approved by the board?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great.
Well, I think if it hasn't been approved by the board, I think you can add what you need to add in there now. If that's the case. If it has not gone before the Board of County Commissioners to be voted upon, to be enacted, it's just in procurement. That could be sent back out. It could be rescinded and remodified. So I know we want to get things done, but if we're going to do things in the right manner and be focused on what the task is, then I'd be inclined to make a motion that you pull that back and ask for a second to pull that back to add that in the process.
So that the board has an opportunity to review the
Correct.
scope of work for inclusion and maybe add more. And if this current vendor cannot provide it, that we, have another RFP that goes out. Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
Okay,
Make the motion.
I
Can
guess
I
I
just
just
say something?
wanna
I
have
just
some
want to,
clarity.
I think it's great to look it over, but the Schimberg Center is really quite unique. It's not like there's someone else who can provide the data. The Schimberg Center is collecting data on Florida housing all the time. I think what we're doing here, and you can go on their website today and pull up the data for Hillsborough County. So what we're asking them to do here is to present the data in a way that's more helpful to policymakers, to look at neighborhoods and not just at census tracts and that kind of thing. But they're analyzing the data all the time. They are under contract from the state to do a rental housing report every few years. And so there is no other provider for these data. I think it's quite appropriate to make sure that they're presenting it to us in a way that we're going to find most useful. But it's a very unique set of data that they have, and they are constantly working on it.
I don't have an issue with that. My thing is if we're asking somebody to do a job, can they do that job for us? If they're doing this work already, great. If we can have them add that into a scope of work, then fine. So I don't have an issue with what they're doing currently.
So I'd like to entertain a motion that we recommend that the agreement get circulated so that everyone here has a good understanding of the scope of work of which would be approved at this board and made recommendation to the BOCC at their January meeting, which is January 13th. Can we wait that long?
Same day. Same day.
That's our date.
That's our date, right. Where we could, if everyone had a chance between now and then to review it, we could then adjust, we could make any minor recommendations or changes, but feel free to send recommendations back to Ms. Howell, anything that you see that you don't see in the agreement that's being circulated. And then at our January 13th meeting, this board can consider approving it and sending it on to the BOCC for approval.
Okay.
Is that? That's my motion.
We can make those adjustments. Please note that this goes through their university system as well, not just our system. So when we restart the clock, we take it back a ways because we have to send the modifications up to them. Then it has to go through the university system to come back to us before it can be executed.
I'd make a motion that Executive Director Howell circulate the report to the board members this month so that we can review it and be advised at the next meeting to give our recommendations.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I have
Mr. Powell?
So to your point, by us getting this recirculated, this pushes the timeline back.
Mm-hmm.
Would it not be more advantageous to approve what's already, been approved, to allow that to continue on, but then to do like a second proposal to them for gentrification or for any other issues, that was not included? So then that way, there is not a lag in getting this information that we already need and know that we need?
Can you address that issue?
Yes, I can. So for us, in the essence of time, that would be the preference for staff. So we can always come and we can modify it based on need or feedback from this board, or from the Board of County Commissioners, or based on specific needs that we see as well. So it's a pretty general agreement that would allow us options in the process.
Ms. Burton.
If they was doing it for free, then I would say, what's going to be best suitable for them. But because we want to do it right, and we want to make sure that it captures everything that we want it to say, then I would suggest to what Councilman Orlando Gould laid out, let us look at it before it's sent to the board for all of that. I want to look at it first, because I don't want to look at it through my eyes of interest and don't see the things that I would like for it to say, and then have to wait, for maybe another RFP or somebody else. These, hopefully, it wouldn't take a longer period of time for them to let us gaze it, look at it, and then make corrections, and then it move forward.
Okay. I think that the handicap we have is we don't have the adoption agreement prior to this meeting to address. And we're being asked to, support an agreement that we haven't seen yet. So we have a motion, and we have do you want to comment on that?
If I may comment, so I think that I agree with Board Member Strom that I have seen the data that the Schimberg organization puts out. So it's a not-for-profit organization based out of a university that gathers data about housing statewide. So I'm not sure that, whether we want to call it revitalization or gentrification, or look at, who the owners of the rental units are that are taking over a lot of our neighborhoods. I live in 33604, that type of thing. I'm not sure that that's the information that we're getting from the Schimberg organization. I think what we're going to get is more in the form of data and demographics, and that we'll be left to, draw a conclusion whether or not we see, signs of gentrification, some change in policies, or, removal of support, that are driving certain people out of communities. I'm not sure that you get that from them, but I think it would be interesting for us to have the contract that we're asked to recommend to County Commission to look at, so that we can all then give our actual opinions on the agreement. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other comment? So we have a motion and a second. All approved?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So you'll distribute the report and the agreement out to the various different board members for comments. Please get your comments back to Director Howell as soon as you have an opportunity to review it, and we'll make sure we discuss it and put it on the agenda for next month.
And Director Howell, we appreciate the work you're doing and the work you've been doing on this particular adoption. But I think if we're going to do things right and try to get it right, we need to make sure we have it in there to what the problems are. If they do one scope of work and they can add this on, fine. But I think we need to find out what is the root cause of what's going on that's creating a lot of the issues. And I think we're just looking for the main result.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, biennial plan. Yay. This is an interesting report. And there's been a lot of sets of eyes that have taken a look at it. It's still open for public comment. This is not the final. It is a draft. And it is marked draft for a reason. Per the Affordable Housing Act, the AHAB has 3 months to offer advice and approval of the biennial plan before it's referred to the Board of County Commission. Due to the reorganization and creation of the plan, we need to approve it today, as the deadline is December 5th. Now, that doesn't mean that it's closed, but it does require that we put it forward for consideration by the Board of County Commission. The Board of County Commission, which ultimately has the authority to approve it, will be discussing the plan this Wednesday. It's actually on the agenda. And I encourage any and all board members to attend that meeting if they'd like to, or provide email commentary so that it can be brought into the record. And it's likely to be set for public hearing on December 18th's regular BOCC meeting. Thus, there are 2 more opportunities to offer comments to the BOCC through public comment as well as through the public hearing. Before I open the item for board discussion, I was hoping to get some clarification, as we heard earlier on a couple of pieces of the report, as to the innovative housing or pilot strategy, which accounts for 10% of the $10 million plan, as I couldn't find any definition or description on that part of the plan, and we've had public comment to that question as well. So we can discuss that, but then I do need to entertain a motion to approve the local affordable housing fund biennial plan to refer it to the BOCC for adoption.
Madam Chair, before you ask for the adoption, I think we should be allowed discussion before.
Agreed. Ultimately, that's where we're going to go, but I'm opening it up for discussion. And to answer the question regarding the innovative housing, because I need more clarification on that specifically.
And so innovative housing is just what I suggested that it is. So there is no clear definition of what innovative housing is. What we clearly see is that there's a need to do something different other than what we're doing now to create more affordable housing units. And so we know that as the Affordable Housing Services that we don't have all of the ideas about creating affordable housing. There are nonprofits that's out there. There are for-profit entities that's out there. There are new products that's out there. There are new ways of doing things. And so this would be an option for us as a community to do something that we've not been able to do before. So, you know, there's been a desire to do, they talk about attainable housing. We see modular type housing. We see tiny home. We've seen container homes. We've seen a number of different types of housing, adaptive reuse, where they've gone in, they've taken churches, they've taken old community centers and shopping centers, old warehouses, and turned them into actual housing units. So this is a suggestion that we could utilize some of our community resources and assets to create affordable housing, to look at some of those things that even might be a blight in our communities and be able to transform them over to affordable housing. So, you know, we're not able to do that with any of the federal funds or the state funds. And so this would allow us to be able to do something different, you know, and a credit to what Ms. Combs was saying, that we need to do something innovative, that we need to push forward in ways that we've not been able to do before. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be used in that way, but it could give some option or flexibility to do something different than we've been able to do before.
So from what I hear you saying, when someone says we can't do that because we've never done it before, you've taken that out. So now somebody has some wild, crazy idea that just might actually be the next best idea, and we can do it. And that's why you left it vague, rather vague?
Yes, that's why I left it vague.
That makes sense then.
For a whole year, the Commission on the Status of Women talked about doing innovative housing and what could best serve our communities all over the nation. All over our nation, they're talking about how we can do housing different to offer, to create housing units for people that are in need. And so one of the things that's clear is that we don't have enough housing units, period. Not affordable housing units. We don't have enough housing units. So when when the housing crisis came, the building and the construction slowed down, and it's not picked up at that pace. And so we have over 1,800 people moving into Hillsborough County every single month. And so we're not getting housing constructed at that rate. And so there's a squeeze on everybody, but particularly those that are strapped for cash. And so we are at a place right now where I don't think we have the luxury of continuing down the same road, that we need to begin to look at some other ways to create affordable housing.
I think what I do like about it, that it's not per se federal or any type of restrictions on it. And I think when you look at a lot of problems with some of our rehab programs as well, when I go out in communities and I try to get folks to call in to try to get their houses rehab, there's so many stipulations to that money, they just say, I forget about it. So many stipulations. And I think we got to look at those things when we're talking about money and where we're getting it from and how we can utilize money to help people. The goal is to help people. And a lot of folks feel, well, my house is in bad condition. If I call these folks and I don't get it, or they send code out, will they take my home? So these are the things that strap our communities. And I still say, as a retired police officer who has worked all communities, especially low communities, the assets are there. And you can stop a lot of gentrification, because what happens is, I tell everybody, if I grew up poor and I got an opportunity and I moved away and came back, my mom's passed on, do I want to still live there? No, I want to go live someplace else. So you have to look at why gentrification happens as well. Or Miss Jones, who's 90 years old, she can't fix her roof no more because she's on fixed income. She can't pay $9,000 to get a roof done. So, baby, I'm just gonna sell my house. I'm gonna see if I can get a little nursing home someplace. That's what happens in these communities, and people don't understand that. But I do, because I've heard those stories. And when money is strapped to different entities, we can't do that because government says you can't do it for that part. It has to be some type of trust fund set aside to help those people as it relates to really getting them help. Because to me, we're not really helping them. We're trying to put a little Band-Aid, but we're not really helping them because the money's tied to something else. But I do like the idea that it's not tied to something. You might can help some more people. And that's what we have to look at. And that's why I say we have the assets. Money needs to go more rehab into some type of fund where you can help these people who are struggling.
Mm-hmm. And affordable housing is very, very similar to job creation. Yes, we need our large multifamily developers, but we also need what was historically known as naturally occurring affordable housing, and that is disappearing. You know, the duplexes, the fourplexes, the 8-unit apartment complexes, the smaller complexes. That's where we're going to see a lot of movement occur. And so, yes, we want the 100-unit, 200-unit, the 50-unit. We want those and we need those. But we also need those fourplexes and sixplexes and eightplexes to occur as well. And so this would allow something like that to happen that wouldn't be able to occur before.
Ms. Fernandez?
Yes, how do we address the public comment that we heard today and some of the concerns that I've heard around the board today about moving some of the funds or the percentage from low income to very low income? How do we address, can that be done in this report before it goes forward to the BOC? Do we have data to support that? How do we address that now that we've heard the public comment as well?
We got direction from the BOCC for a minimum of 30%, and so we work and for a maximum of 100%. So for me, I operated under this kind of dumbbell, one on one end and one on the other end, trying to ensure that we have several different categories of services, services for people who want to become homeowners, services for very low income, DPA, rehab, preservation, multifamily, all of that. So I tried to be inclusive because we're not just serving our very urban communities, but we're also serving our rural communities as well. So when we look at Hillsborough County is very, it's a varied county. It really differs, and the needs of the people differ as well. And so the type of housing or some of the things that we may do in Plant City may not be undertaken out in the university area or over in East Tampa. But we certainly are trying to create programs to serve the entire population.
To your point, normally in affordable housing worlds, affordable housing is defined up to 120% of AMI. The BOCC cut that off to 100, so it does weight more towards the very low in terms of the allocations and the percentages. Two, it's in several of the places within the report and has been referenced in numerous, talking about how we break out the percentages. It is, 30%, and then it's 50% or below. So that gives us some room to get to a larger weighting towards the 30%. We also have to have people that can actually build that housing or make that housing available. And so we have a little bit of wiggle room to be able to find where our policies help foster greater amount of housing units that can serve the 30% population. We can mandate 50 to 60 to 100% all at that 30% of AMI, but if we don't have any builders that can build to that, we're sitting on money we can't use. And so there is a bit of a challenge. As it pertains to the innovative housing issue and the way the report is organized, my concern was, and I think it's to address what you're describing as well, is that we have specific items showing dollar amounts going into various categories, one of which is 10 million or 10% towards innovative housing, but there's no bullet point anywhere in the report that says where that is. If we talk about pilot projects, and so that's great, but I was trying to figure out how is that, and if it just means relabeling or titling, where it is described under evaluation and performance measures, I would assume that what we're talking about when we're talking about innovative housing, it's the area that talks about pilot projects or pilot programs, open RFA, is where we're talking about ways that we can be innovative. Is that correct?
So when we're talking about innovative housing can come in the terms of, it can be rental, it can be a new product with rehabilitation or with home ownership products. So Florida Home Partnership utilize a very different type of building material right now that is innovative. Bringing in a different type of housing stock in an area that has not been present there before is innovative. The end product, whether it be multifamily or a home, whether it be rental, let me say that, whether it be rental or home ownership, they're going to wind up in one or two of those categories, okay? They're going to wind up in a rental type situation or in a home ownership type situation. For these funds, we are suggesting or recommending that most of the funding is going towards rental because that is the pressing need. We know that there is a need for home ownership, for preservation, and so that's included as well. But the pressing need right now is for rental so that people can access units.
Let me ask a question. When you said a keyword builder, can you define it? Because my thing is, when you say builder, you say there's not enough builders. What are we talking about when you say not enough builders? We talking about a big conglomerate person? We talking about, I look at tiers where people can do work. So when you say a builder, we look at a builder who can build 150 units, or we talking about a builder who can build 10 units? When you say that, how do you define that when you're talking about money? Because when you say they're not enough builders, I see builders all the time. But what I hear from builders is that we don't get those jobs, or they want the RFP is written so large, we can't even get a part of that. So I'm just wondering, should there be a level of builder, whereas this contract says, well, you build 10 units, or you build 50, or you can build 100 units. So I'm just wondering when we use the word builder, because I hear that all the time from actual construction companies and builders. They say, well, we can never get a part of that.
I think it's whoever's going to submit for the RFP, right?
There you go.
They don't care what size they are, as long as they have the appropriate funds and insurance and bonds and what have you.
But it goes back to, and it comes up to the RFP. It's all how you write the RFP as well. Because if I see this gigantic number, well, I would love to be a builder, to be a part of that, but I can't do 150, but I could do maybe 20 of that. So when you say builder, I'm just looking at how the RFP is being written to get the need to satisfy the people. Make sense? I mean, I'm just,
No, sir, I was trying to recollect whether or not I talked about builders. I couldn't remember. I heard Commissioner Overman mention builders, but certainly I didn't. But when we look at the vendors, we typically, if we are looking at multifamily development, we put an RFP out with somebody with a history of developing multifamily. We have to manage the risk that's involved in developing something like that. If we're looking at single family, whether that's preservation, we typically have contracted with nonprofit organizations within the community, and then they subcontract with the actual contractors. So we don't provide direct services in Hillsborough County Affordable Housing Services. So it's not like we take the applicants, we go through the applicants, we hire the contractors. I believe that the city of Tampa, that they're designed to deliver those services that way, but affordable housing is done in a different, our business model is different. So ours is vendor-based as opposed to direct service contracted.
Actually, I think Ms. Combs had her hand up first.
So I'm trying to understand, I'm looking at the project units, and I see that with this money, we are looking at 392 units. So for me, I'm trying to look at each of the categories, and forgive me, I'm new to the board, so coming on late. But see, the best ROI that we have here is multifamily rentals, 249. Then I go down a notch to look at person infill, and I see 18. So can you help me understand what 18 units for $2 million we get? What is that detailed out?
Absolutely. I'd be glad to speak to that. So typically when we look at multifamily would be partnered up with low-income housing tax credits. So that's money that we would utilize like we did with the MedMen and Blue Sky project to support the delivery of those units. But affordable housing is not affordable. So when we look at the cost per unit for any type of multifamily, you're still running at about $200, in some cases, $220,000 per unit delivery. Okay? So when we look at, so when we look at the cost, and I've looked at several different multifamily developments that we've done, some 50 units, some 200 unit, right, to come up with this this average cost. This is a projection. And, you know, the numbers really are what they are. So we looked at preservation, we looked at rehab, the amount of money that can go into a multifamily rehab or even into a single-family rehab. We looked at special needs, the average cost that it takes to deliver special needs, whether that's going in, doing some actual rehab work, or doing architectural barriers or designs so that people can live in their homes longer or better utilize their space and not have to go to ALFs or to other types of assisted living facilities. The PERS program, that would allow a vendor to be able to go into a community that doesn't necessarily have 3 or 4 acres of land, but maybe a smaller acreage of land to develop maybe 8 units, 10 units, maybe acquisition rehab. So it would give some flexibility so that we can really begin to get some units. But yes, Sarah, so when you look at the 249, we absolutely, hands down, garner the greater result from matching these funds up with low-income housing tax credits. The limitation with that is we only get 1 tax credit deal in Hillsborough County per year, 1 9% tax credit deal in Hillsborough County per year, unless someone is able to get a special needs. And that's shared between the city and the county. Now, we may be able to get a 4% tax credit deal, but then that's a bond deal. So for one particular 4% tax credit deal that we did, and it was, I want to say, a little over $13.5 million. It was approximately 54 units. And I want to say the county put in more than $4 million into that project, more than $4 million into that project. So I say to you that, you know, it is costly. And so when we talk about spreading the numbers out and looking at 30, 50, or 80% median family income, it would allow a vendor to be able to carry more debt on a project if he's able to get more income, he or she able to get more income in on a project, so.
I still have a follow-up to that. So if the person infill would be money used for like low-income housing tax credit deal, wouldn't the number of units be more than 18?
No, because the purse wouldn't necessarily be for low-income housing tax credit. That would be if you didn't have any tax credit. Maybe you're just trying to do some affordable housing. So maybe you're trying to do a sixplex. Maybe you're trying to do 10 units in your neighborhood.
I think what maybe is a little bit confusing here is that in some of these instances, you've projected units based on the assumption that you're leveraging other sources, and for others, you haven't assumed you're going to leverage other sources. But the fact is that, as you said, for multifamily rental, only one project's going to get the LIHTC, so you're going to have other projects that don't. And conversely, for some of the other single-family housing preservation, there may be opportunities to leverage with SHIP or some other funds. So I think that's why it feels like it doesn't add up, because the assumptions are different for each of these lines.
But I want to say, for the set-asides, there's very little opportunity to be able to leverage private funds. You know, so if there were a lot of private funds out here to do affordable housing, people would be wrapped around this building. Okay, there are not a lot of private funds to do affordable housing because you have to be able to get enough money coming in each month to be able to carry that debt. And so there's very limited amount of money. Now, I can tell you that I've been in this business more than 25 years. So we used to do all units, or we had this whole thing. We're going to do apartment complexes for 30% and below median family income. Some 20 years later, we know that that was a grave error. Because really less than that, 10 years later, because those apartment complexes could not sustain themselves. Even at 40% median family income, they could not sustain themselves. And oftentimes at 60% median family income, after their 15 year, they're coming back in for recapping. And so if we're truly looking at community sustainability, if that's what we want to look at in terms of affordable housing, then we got to truly look at the numbers and say, what do we want to do here? You know, do we want to continue to do the same thing? And if that's the will, then so be it. But we also need to be honest about whether, you know, what the cost is. That affordable housing is very costly. If we look right now at a person at 50% below median family income, and they're not going to be earning that max typically, right? But they would be short, for a 2-bedroom unit, they would be short more than $1,000 a month of what they could afford to pay. More than $1,000 a month. And that's a lot of money. That's a huge gap. And so that's what we're trying to cover on the front end.
I completely understand that. I'm really talking about the way it's presented.
Okay.
Because the multifamily rental, in the text, it says it's up to $180,000 per unit, and if you're really building 249 units, that's $44 million. So you're assuming that these get leveraged in some way, whereas you're not assuming that for the others. And I understand the difficulty in finding money to leverage it, but I think in the way it's presented, it makes it hard for people reading this to understand how, you know, why the discrepancy between what you're getting in different programs.
I think what may be helpful then is to add in a leveraging column.
Something like that, yeah. So assumptions about
A projected
leveraging,
leveraging column. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that would be very helpful. And honestly, in the titling of Section 3 is where the innovative housing pilot projects and all that other, all of what we're talking about in terms of innovative ways that we can actually utilize not only the dollars that we have available to us, but where those partnerships in innovative ways can be actually manifested, is everything under Section 3. And so it actually brings that back to the table. Because the challenge is the discrepancy between how the table interacts with the report.
Right.
I found that to be a little challenging as well. So I think if we address the titling here to the innovation and then talk about the various different ways that we leverage and partner in the pilot projects, I think we can address what we're having challenges with by adding like this should be, you know, the innovative housing, you know, where we use innovation not only in partnerships, but in how we develop policies to build those partnerships and where we look for opportunities in development of the overall project, because that's, I think, where the disconnect is. The other thing that we have in our packet that we haven't discussed is, you know, there are grant updates that are gigantic in the area of special projects, special needs, veterans housing, individuals with special needs, certain sectors of our population that have housing needs, where we can partner with other agencies that are looking to provide a roof over someone's head while they're going through some type of crisis. So there's innovative ways that we can utilize those dollars and serve those populations that would fall under innovation, that would talk to our lowest income citizens without necessarily compromising the goal. And looking for ways that we can use those grant dollars to get that leverage that we're talking about. And I think that's where those pilots and RFA come in there, but it doesn't match up with the table, which makes it very difficult to figure out how do I put these numbers together. So I think we're all on the same page. So make a few little adjustments, because trust me, the BOCC is going to come back and ask the same questions. So I think we can probably address that. Ms. Burton, you had a comment?
Okay, I had kind of like two questions. Were there any funding left over from last year from the affordable housing budget? Was there like any monies?
Well, yes, there was some funding that was left over, and so really what I was waiting on is really a green light from you guys so that we could kind of bundle and move forward with the strategies and activities.
Okay, and I just want to be real clear. I know this is a hard task, job, but I'm beginning to feel like the whole ordinance of hope is kind of being hijacked to do too many things. For 6 years, that the advocacy of making a request, demand that this county look at how it would help very low-income people. And it, one of the speakers said, well, we want it 100%. Now they've been reduced almost down to 30%, and so there seemed to be an off balance there. For me, to really build a model for a county, a city that is really dedicated and sincere of taking care of saying, we're going to take this on our first budget plan. We're going to really be dedicated to helping people that is extremely low income. But if you're doing 50 other things, I think that's why we're having to do this, and at the end of the day, how much will truly be addressed? So maybe we shouldn't have called it the Hope Affordable Housing Plan and just call it an affordable housing plan, because it's not going to really take care of, in a large capacity, the needs of the very vulnerable in this first cycle. Maybe to do it on the first the first year, we say, well, we're going to stay focused and committed to the HOPE agenda, and we're going to put all in, 100% dealing with the, low-income population, and then year 2, we're going to do something different. It's doing too much. That's just my opinion. I think it's doing way, way too much, and I think it's really going to get hijacked by developers, because you hear that all the time, what Councilman Gould said. They can't do it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. But they go and they are able to get so much more in tax breaks and enterprise zone, opportunity zone. They get everything. And the poor simply do not have nothing. This was our hope, of hoping that with this plan, we would see it address at least 50%. If it couldn't do 100%, at least 50.
I understand. Actually, I think Councilman Good and then Jerry
Well,
Donohue.
When you look at a plan, sometimes you have to go back and forth to balance it out to make the plan really operational. I have several friends who are developers, a lot of them. A lot of them do a lot of good work. And what they tell me about affordable housing is this: they would love to do affordable housing. Hear it all the time. Oh, no, I would love to do affordable housing. But what kind of incentive I have if I do affordable housing? You talked about it. The amount of money doesn't match up if I did it to cover this big building I just built. But if I had some incentives to put some affordable housing, then I can cover the base. That's one thing. Hear it all the time from developers. But what really bothers me when you talk about affordable housing, there's so many different caveats to affordable housing. There's so many different needs. But when you really talk about, if you really look in the text of helping, I hate to use the word poor people, but helping those underserved people. Because if I'm a father, and I've got a wife, and I got a couple of kids, and I had a passing discretion, very minor, I can't live with my family. I can't live with my family. So where do I live? So we go to pillar of post to other family members to try to put us up, and we go to my auntie, my grandma's house, because we can't get a place. See, these are the boundaries, what I call roadblocks, that really stick to the heart of why people suffer in communities. You have to look at why people are homeless. That is one of the major reasons a lot of people are homeless, because they can't get into apartment complexes. But all these apartment complexes are empty. But they're empty. But we have an affordable housing crisis. you know, as an elected official, I always say as a retired police officer, because I've seen people at their worst. I've had to put people out in the middle of the night, try to find them a place to go. So I have a compassion to always say, not what we can't do, but what can we do? And we have to put policies in place to prevent these small things from happening to people. We can't continue to have a foot on people's neck and never give them a chance to advance. So what, you made a pass in this case, you got a family. You can't say he needs to wait 20 years before you get an apartment. How many people I get calling my office, 60-year-old ladies calling me, Councilman, I can't get an apartment. You know, a small misdemeanor, a small felony that really amount to nothing, a check for all, you can't get a person an apartment. So I think this county, the city council, we got to come together to find out and put something in place to stop some of these barriers. Oh, we don't want all kind of criminals in places, but by the same token, people do change. People do get themselves together with hope to help them. So I think we need to look at that as well. How do we get people in housing? Because when I drive around, I see a lot of apartment complexes empty. I see a lot of people who won't rent to people. So we need to look at how we kind of fix some of those problems to help some of these problems we have here.
And that's actually, to your point, why we reorganized the board, is because it is more than just affordable housing and building housing units. It is actually our land use. It's our transportation plan. It's our, rental policies. It's all of those things. So we can't solve that in this one plan today. But, and I appreciate the commentary, because I think it's critically important that we, bring those issues up and make references and recommendations to our various different legislative boards, as well as state, leaders, where we have discrepancies that keep people from being able to function in our communities. So I think that is a grander picture than what we can address in this biennial plan. But I do understand exactly where you are, and land use is a big one. Land use and transportation plan, where we focus our growth and where we focus our housing units, is critically important when we develop an affordable housing policy. Councilman Donahue.
I think you both of you, I'm sitting between two who hit the nail on the head. I think what we need to remember is that hope should not be a privilege. It should be an expectation that everyone should have it. And my concerns are exactly the same as yours, is that we have a lot of people out there who, even if we provide it for them, we have other rules in place that keep them from obtaining a safe place to live. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that this advisory board is a voice for that, not just brick and mortar. Or, I was just out in Seattle, and you would be amazed with snow on the ground that there are tent cities that are endorsed by the county government, because at least it gets them into something. Now, into something should not be the goal. Mm-hmm. And you would think that those tent cities would be here in Florida. Maybe not today, because, we're all Floridians, we're chilly, but in Seattle, people are living in tents with tarps over them, and they are happy to have them. Okay, so I don't want to get to that point, but I think we're not doing something. What I really want to say is that in looking at these numbers, please tell me that they're flexible, that if there's no need for this moderate income, that money could be used in another bracket. Mm-hmm. And then I think we start focusing on getting people to build exactly like you said. Look, we've got the money here, let's go. We also know that $10 million is like a spit in the bucket for what we need. And we understand that, but we're happy to have it, okay? Please don't let it get out of here that I'm not happy with it.
All right, we're
delighted.
Right. So what I'm going to ask each of you to do is, we've all brought up various different points. Any recommendations you can email to the director between now and Wednesday would be very helpful. There is going to be open commentary until the Board of County Commission does actually have the public hearing, as I mentioned earlier, on the 19th, I believe. 18th. So, or 18th rather. So please get your comments in. Did you have one more?
Yes,
Did you want to mention?
before we do that, I think that we're all looking at this from very different perspectives, and I think there is such a wealth of knowledge in Cheryl's brain that it's hard to condense it down to just a few pages. So I think there's just so much behind this that we don't know and we can't see, especially coming to this and being newer or not being experienced in government at all. There's just so much that we can't see here in a chart or on a page. So before we go and look at the document individually, would it be possible to restate exactly what the ordinance is and exactly what numbers we're talking about for the benefit of the people sitting at the table, sitting in the audience and watching at home, just so that when we look at that document, we keep those things in mind and don't get hung up on a word that could be interpreted many different ways.
Are you referencing the numbers on page 3 of the biennial plan? Okay.
So if we could just restate what exactly that ordinance is and then what exactly the incomes are that correspond to these categories.
Would you like me to do that?
Yes,
Sure.
please. I was going to say, I could start, but it's not going to go well.
So we read it, but maybe not everybody's
Yeah,
read it.
so the ordinance itself is very broad, and it is the plan that is intended to flesh out the details. So the ordinance simply says that not less than 30% of the funds, and that's not less than 30%, shall be spent on affordable housing for very low-income households, and very low income is 50% of AMI or below, and that also not less than 30% of the funds allocated to the program shall be spent on affordable housing for low-income households, and that's 80% AMI or below, and not more than 5% shall be spent on administration. So beyond that, it's up to, the plan is the vehicle by which we make some more specific decisions.
And what are those numbers? How do you define the AMI? Is that the 63,000 figure?
Cheryl will probably have more specific information on that.
Is that here?
I am pulling it up.
It's like 63, 2 or something like that.
Yeah. So if we,
39.
Yeah, it's restated each year, and it has gone up in the last few years. A couple of years ago, it's like 59, so it has increased within Hillsborough County to, I think, 63 and change.
Right.
63,000 and change. So that's a household making, 31,000, which is very difficult to afford anything when you're making that. Which is why
Classroom
looking at.
teachers who are making that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why looking for innovative ways that we address this issue in terms of how we grow and where we place or where we encourage affordable housing development or restructuring or building. A good example was an eye-opening experience that I experienced when we had a sustainability presentation made showing that during a hurricane, that one of the best areas for staying in place was in the high part of the city. But unfortunately, the housing stock wasn't sustainable in a hurricane. So while an area on a map would suggest the people in that area could stay in place or weather the storm or shelter in place, sounded great, but when they actually did an evaluation of the housing stock in that area and the age of the housing stock in that area, it was not advised. So when we look at sustainability and infill and SHIP dollars and what we do to help low-income individuals stay in their home so that they can shelter in place, we really need to look at those areas where the age of the homes matter. And it's those little things that are really big things that this biennial plan does take into some flexibility to create. That's where the infill and the PERS come into place. It's where housing preservation comes into place. It can serve multiple goals if that is an area that we would like to make sure we focus. If housing preservation allows for more housing to be maintained in areas where transit is available, for example, or where jobs are close by or within walking distance, that's a way of achieving that goal. Is it an innovative way of doing it? Possibly. But that's where I had some recommendations on sort of relabeling how we do this. Because I think when we stick, innovative housing, a specific number that's 10%, of the overall budget, and other areas give us enough flexibility to achieve multiple goals. For example, I think we can get where we want to go. But I do think it's going to be important that we have, everyone's opportunity to give us some ideas in terms of how we might want to make sure it's more clear and still have enough flexibility over the next 2 years as we look at our policies and adopt policies that can focus on that very low income population, as well as the need for additional units, and the best way to go about doing that.
Is there a way, because I know that the board is meeting, or it's going to be brought up this week, this Wednesday, the BOCC meeting?
It's on the agenda. This draft is on the
Wow.
agenda for BOCC commentary, and then the public hearing will be the next board meeting
On the
this
18th.
month.
Is there a way that we can make a recommendation from this board? I just feel like if we can give some sort of a recommendation to increase the amount of the 30% of the very low income of the entire budget, it just seems really low. And I've attended some of the BOCC meetings, hearing from Hope, hearing from residents in the community about how important, this population is. Is there a way that we can make a recommendation so on Wednesday it can state that this board is recommending, and my recommendation would be that not less than 40% shall be spent on very low income housing. Raising it another 10% I think would go a long way with, the people who have been fighting very hard to see this happen. I know that this isn't a governing board, so to speak, but just having a recommendation saying that this board is recommending that that be upped might go a long way with the BOCC meeting this Wednesday.
But do we fully understand why she didn't do that in the first place? Because I'm sure she would love to, and there's got to be a reason that it's the way that it is. That was my point.
No, really, I just wanted to be able to create some flexibility. So we get RFPs that come in, okay? And so we, sometimes we don't get any responses on our RFPs because it's not enough incentives, right? So if you come in and you got low-income housing tax credits, yeah, you got enough money to do it. But if you don't, if you just coming in with private dollars to do it, oftentimes it's very, very difficult to close that gap. And so the way the gap is closed is through equity partners. So equity partners come in in a number of different ways, through land resources, impact fee waivers, through funding, And so, and the other way it comes through is through debt. And so they can only carry the debt that they can afford to pay back.
Chairwoman, so I see your need for flexibility, and I don't disagree. I do think the way the ordinance is written, that we could, in the future, choose a product and send 100% to people under 30% if that was advisable. I'm not sure, but I'm sure probably Mr. Wilson could opine. But, there also may be categories where, say, a 4% deal could be 100% of the units at 60%, and then as a board, we might all think that was a really good idea. So, maybe leaving some flexibility, but when thinking about this, so this actual document gets adopted as part of the ordinance, and then becomes more or less controlling on the things that we're going to look at and the categories we're going to try to fit things in the future?
Yeah, so when the biennial plan is adopted, it can be amended more frequently than every other year. Also, if this board votes today to recommend something other than what's written here, my understanding is that the item on this Wednesday's agenda has been pulled for discussion, and either staff or the commissioner can advise the BOCC of what this board's recommendation is.
So, hearing that, then I guess, and again, with concern for future flexibility, since we could easily recommend that 100% of the money go to people at the lowest category, seems eminently flexible. But, some of these categories, like your description of innovative housing, seems to fit, the majority of what you described fits within the PURS and infill category, which is enumerated in the document. Innovative use of commercial buildings, conversion of commercial facilities, so they seem to somewhat be the same category. hear Commissioner Gudis and Ms. Burton and think that, you know, the only thing I would add to the idea of the preservation of existing housing is not just the importance that they have outlined, but additionally the importance to the surrounding homes in the neighborhood in general. So, you know, obviously if somebody is on a fixed income and can't get their roof fixed, that's very important. But when that home is inherited or moves on, if it's in good shape, you know, also getting rid of the blighting effect, you know, that home might have on the neighborhood because that person can't afford to fix it up. And, you know, that's beneficial not only to the neighborhood, but also to the county's, you know, tax roll. So,
Correct.
you know, that's a very important line in here. Housing preservation, special needs, you know, obviously, there's a lot of good innovative projects in the country, and it would be nice if we could encourage somebody to bring something like that forward. But, you know, if you're looking at innovative housing and PURS infill, my question would be those large $3 million of funding, if we were able to, you know, leverage that if 4% deals come in focus because the Sadowski Trust Fund doesn't get swept and there's State Department incentive loan money to fill the majority of the gap, but we need local contribution or that type thing. You know, what flexibility do we have within this framework without having to go back to the county commission? So I guess that's my comment.
Yeah.
Specifically, you know, looking at the categories of innovative housing and PURS infill and understanding if there's a leveraging opportunity, you know, that's presented to this group that we like and would like to recommend how that works. And one would assume that by definition that would serve the most affordable people, but.
Okay, so thank you for your commentary. I think what I hear Ms. Combs mentioning is on page 3 in the lower table, there's a recommendation or set aside sort of goal of 30% at the 50% AMI. Is that where you
Yes, ma'am.
suggested increasing that dollar amount? This is actually referencing the closer to the ordinance to solve for all practical purposes, and that's a minimum. We can go as high as we want to, based on where we can find the opportunity and the resources within that work. But the other item that I think is important to reference that Mr. Harden brought up is that I did pull it off of consent, and specifically to have an opportunity for this board to bring commentary, as well as to allow the members of the public, allow Hope to bring commentary so that at the public hearing, we end up with a document that we can all live with. So I wanted to make sure that you're aware of that.
So would this board be in the position to be able, if I made a motion and that motion carried forward, would that be able to be presented to the BOCC on Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay, well, I would like to make a motion that the table on page 3, under the percentage, or under the following table presents project amount of construction types, activity, and amounts set aside for specific income categories, be edited to not less than 40% shall be spent on very low income housing. That would be my motion.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Takamori, is the low income limited to a maximum of, which would be the 80%, limited to, what are the limitations on that number? Is it 50?
None.
You mean if it's 80% or below, so
80%
it
or, yeah.
encompasses the very low income? But yes, if you're going to adjust the very low income to 40% in this chart, you're going to need to take that 10% from another
Out of low
category.
income housing, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Or moderate.
Or moderate.
Could you talk into the mic? We can't.
I'm sorry.
On the right side. On this side.
Yeah, you
Sorry.
have to pull it closer to you.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I just said is that if they modify the 30% to 40%, they are going to need to make another adjustment to find that 10%.
that $1 million, because there's a
Yes.
direct correlation. I would ask that the motion be modified to be 50% very low, 50% of the funds be applied to very low income 50%, which would then increase that amount to $5 million, and that the low income 80% be reduced to 25.5%, which again would make that amount $2.5 million, so that we're actually taking significantly more dollars and putting it to the very low income as opposed to the low income, because the bottom is where the problem really is.
Cheryl, what are the potential risks or problems with doing that? And are there any?
Well, as I said, we're not sure of the proposals that's going to come in. And so one of the things that will be impacted will be homeownership activities. So a lot of times, and sometimes that comes in access, whether that's through DPA type programs, and sometimes that comes through preservation. Because many people that live in homes, if you think about it, if you got somebody that lives in a home that it's two people and they're retired and they get $1,400 a month, then they are over that 50% median family income. If they get $1,200 a month, they're over that 50% median family income. And so, they may not have enough money to replace an AC system for $6,000. They may have enough money to pay you $3,000 in taxes. And so that's the kind of impact that this would have. And so it could have several others too, but just off the top of my head, that's certainly some of them. So as I said, my attempt was to provide a category of services that would service the entire Hillsborough County.
I have a question.
I just want to add, I've got about probably 2,800 units that have provisions within the financing, lures or whatever they may be, that the tenant, or resident as I prefer to call them, have an option to opt out and get a credit subsidized by the owner. I can tell you without doubt that in the last 5 years, not one of those residents has opted out for home ownership for the exact reason Ms. Howell said. They would rather continue to rent and not worry about that $3,000 water heater, or they'd rather all the water heat. If they got to pay $10 more a month or $20 more a month in rent because of the total operating expenses, they would much rather do that, because they're going to lose whatever equity they have and their roof over their head, because they can't afford an air conditioner that goes out, or, stuff happens. And so home ownership as a percentage of living accommodations has decreased significantly over the last 10 years because of just that problem. The amount of folks who can't afford home ownership are opting out of that, saying, you know what, the American dream isn't exactly what the American dream used to be. My American dream is being able to keep that roof over my family's head for another 10 years, and if that means I'm going to rent this place, so be it. They're going to go to the same school, they're going to go to the same parks, the church is still going to be available. All of these things are going to be exactly the same. But yet, I'd much rather provide for my family to have a place than have a place that's mine.
And I think that's important to recognize that our marketplace, given the median income and our our economy, right now, if you're a potential homeowner, even with our first-time homebuyer programs and the down payment assistance programs, you can't buy a house in the city, in the center of the city, because the price level is at a point where you can't afford to get into it. There's not enough down payment assistance, or you make not enough to really, really, truly afford that home, given the price of that home. So while we have a challenge here, I think to your point, until our overall economy does some changes, it's going to be difficult to win with focusing on home ownership as being the primary goal. I think we can do that by providing more housing units through rental properties as much as possible, especially along those corridors where our service economy, as well as education, as well as our public servants, that need a place inside an area where transit is available and be able to afford to live here. So, Mr. Powell, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you. I'm still in support of my second for Mrs. Combs' motion, but my concern would be, and question for Ms. Howell, is if we, were to move forward with adjusting, towards the 50% with the projects that that you have like already in the pipeline or in funding for the very low income, are those projects going to be actually sustainable, if those projects have to be are going to be housed with residents that are going to be in that very low income? Can those projects actually make it? Can they survive? Right. Can they generate the cash flow? Can they generate the revenue? Are we, by doing this, it's a very utopian idea of giving this, demographic more money. We want to help them, but are we actually going to pull away from projects that are, that are in the pipeline that are intended to still help, other people? I mean, are we going to actually create more harm than good?
So one of the things that I want to say is that typically, even for the low-income housing tax credits, that is 60% and below median family income. So we're looking at 50% here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanna bring that up. So with
Sorry, can you say that last
I'm saying that even with the low-income housing tax credits, they typically look at 60% and below median family income. And right now, the board is suggesting 50% below median family income. So that's one point. The other point is that with the 4% housing tax credits, they can go 60%, but they can go up beyond that point too. Sometimes, a lot of times 80%, sometimes 120%. We know that our funds can't be used over families of 100% median family income. But even with our RTTBs, Florida Home Partnership, Habitat for Humanity, the people that they serve are often greater than 50% median family income as well. And so I guess, it really is whatever the recommendation of the board is to be able to carry out these activities that, that I'm going to do my best to be able to put together projects, But I implore you to think about the neighborhoods that you serve, and what are your neighborhoods crying out for right now? What are the needs of the people that you're representing? You know that better than I do. And so one of the things that's clear to me is that we need multifamily rental properties. And so it was clear to me, and it was clear in the recommendations that I made as well. And so I see the needs of people all over this county as the Affordable Housing Director for Hillsborough County, not just in specific neighborhoods. So I brought to you a plethora of services. And so right now, this is really kind of the pleasure of the board, whatever your recommendations are, whatever's going to go forward to the BOCC, and then whatever they choose from there. But I think a part of what I need to do is to bring together some options for you. And so that's what I'm here for. I'm here to serve.
So we have a motion on the floor. And we have a second. Who actually made the second? Mr. Powell?
I asked for a modification.
Can you ask for a modification?
Modification of that motion to be
So you're offering a substitute motion?
I'm offering a substitute motion, thank you. For that amount, for very low income to be 50% and the low income to be 35.5%.
Okay, do we have a second on the modification?
I don't think the numbers add up.
Numbers don't add up.
It would have to be 25.5.
He said earlier,
Right.
I said it earlier, okay, thank you very much.
So
Cheryl, what happens to the funds if they are not able to be spent, if they're allocated?
that's what I was wondering, too.
The funds are be rolled over, and I'll come back to this board and say, hey, we put our RFPs, we were not able to get projects. If we put our RFPs and we were able to get great projects, I'll bring that news back as well, so, along with pictures.
Right.
It doesn't disappear, it just rolls over.
So it doesn't disappear, the dollars won't get spent. We would have to come back and make a recommendation to modify the biennial plan and then have the BOCC approve that plan. So, do we have a second to Mark's motion? Okay, I don't hear it. And having a second, the motion dies. Go back to the original motion, which was at 40% of very low? Okay. And what was the other number below that?
Another number was not called out, but we do need to add another number. So the balance.
So what is your recommendation, Ms. Combs?
My recommendation would be to move it from moderate income to very low.
So we'll have no allocation towards moderate income?
Correct. Not from these funds.
Do we want to talk about who those people are that are getting left out?
I think that would be wise.
Yeah.
So I know that, have knowledge of deals where, in a 254-unit apartment complex that included both moderate, low income, very low income, and extremely low income. So, this, again, I think the important factor is that, that this board have the maximum flexibility in the plan that the county commission adopts so that as people bring projects forward, that we can look at them for what the opportunity is. So I'm not going to support the increase to 40%.
Ms. Combertin.
I support the 40%, knowing that this is our first effort out, right? With this first bundle of funding, right? It's just been my experience that when I do hear of development for moderate to low, and we ask what is the unit numbers for extremely low, sometimes it's less than 1%. I mean, it'd be like, why were we ever included in that process? So if the units are, say for an example, 240 units, it might be 8 for very low income people. I just think we have to take a chance in saying that if we build a model, use this first opportunity to see if it works. And if they don't come back and the developers do not want to do it, then we would know what county we're living in. It will speak volume. You can't have all of these needs in the community. And there's pools of money, Banks of America, other banking institutions is always reeling out for first responders. They do that. Usually I never hear anybody saying doing anything for very extremely low income people. As if we become the scourge of this society. This $110 million is not the end all, but it can be the beginning for those like Councilman and the director to show that this county was able to do the impossible. So I would support, and I'm hoping, we just move forward with faith that we can change the whole composition of trying to tackle on this real issue of homelessness in this county.
I don't get a vote, but I just don't want anybody to get left out. So when I look at that number, I think of my friend Jamie, who grew up right outside of Ybor City in East Tampa, Tampa Heights. And she's one of the recipients of one of those domain homes. And I know that's City of Tampa, not Hillsborough County. But she's moving down the street from her mom in the same neighborhood, and she's able to buy a house now. And she's a single mom. I mean, she's not, well, she's single, and she's able to buy that home because of those funds. She wouldn't be able to do it if it weren't for that. And there's not a lot of programs that serve somebody like her. Yes, her income looks good on paper, but when you take into account the number of student loans she has to be able to earn that income, when you take into account that she doesn't have a family that can help her, I don't want her to get completely left out either.
Well, the thing about it is that in this city, I mean, there's banking institutions that favor her income. There's also City of Tampa. I don't know if she's probably in the City of Tampa. There's an additional $15,000. And if she's in East Tampa, then there's additional $15,000. So, you know, to any of those circumstances, there's a lot of assistance that's out there in these communities that is looking to change the whole character of the community.
But that won't exist anymore if they're not allowed to
This
do
is just
that.
for the home, this is just for the HOPE funds, correct?
Yes.
I just want to restate that.
Well,
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to modify it at 40% for very low income, 55%, 55.5% in low income, and 0% in the moderate, 100%.
And can I just clarify that we have a second to that because the motion was changed slightly?
I'll continue to support. Second.
You'll support the second, okay.
Thank you.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Aye. Nay.
There's two, okay. Motion carries.
Ms. Howell, you know, we're going to give this a shot, and hopefully, you know, usually when the recommendations come from the lay board, usually the main board usually adopts. But I want to make sure that when we write the RFP, that we're clear on the goal and the objectives. Also, that we make an attempt, a good effort to look at incentives as well if we do want to move the project, because they're going to ask for that. So any concessions we can make, but we don't want to give away the farm, because I always believe that you have to give back. So when we write these RFPs, we make sure that we're inclusive of that and make sure that those incentives that could be given back as well.
Yes, sir.
Because everybody's making money,
Yes, sir.
and the community has to have a benefit to it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to be here till next week if we don't move forward, so.
That's because you're doing a good job.
This is, well, I know, I appreciate everyone's ability to stay as long as we have. We have several items, director's reports, some federal grant updating, which is in your package.
Do I have anything left to say?
But there's really, the affordable housing open house is there. Thank you, everyone, for getting that done. So, by the way, director's report, that's all your fault. You're holding us up here, Sheriff.
I know that. I'm trying to get to it.
Well, we had a lot of stuff to do. It's just part of the reason why we need to have monthly meetings instead of, bi-monthly meetings. So I appreciate making the adjustments to everyone's schedule. Okay, I'm gonna leave it up to you.
Okay, great. Yes, we did have the Affordable Housing Open House. It took place in Palm River, I want to say on November 5th. Thank you for all of the people who came out. Thank you to the staff. It was great. We're going to have another one the first quarter of the year. We'll be planning that one with the City of Tampa. I want to say it's probably going to be in April during Fair Housing Month. So we're in talks with that right now. We in your board package, there are a number of different agenda items that were approved over the past month since our last meeting as well. So if you have any questions or any concerns on those, certainly I am open and willing to respond to you. And that brings me to the Affordable Housing Services update. Michelle, are you still here?
She-
She is. Michelle is the Monitoring and Compliance Manager in Affordable Housing.
Good afternoon. As Cheryl said, my name is Michelle Boone. I am the Compliance and Monitoring Manager for Affordable Housing. Since our last meeting, just give a little update of what we've accomplished since November, October. Diana Gardens, we are monitoring them for tenant eligibility. It's a 24-unit townhome project in the East Tampa area. It will be getting ready to open very soon, so we're very proud of that project. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we have over 70 multifamily properties that we monitor annually throughout the affordability period. That equates to over 6,000 units that we manage. We don't manage them, but we monitor them. We monitor the tenants for eligibility for income and for rent restrictions on an annual basis. And then we work with the contracts team for any projects that are moving a little slow. We do give technical assistance to any projects that needs it to move them further along. So I am also still serving as the contract services manager temporarily. So I'm going to go ahead and skip Willette for just a minute while I'm here and talk about some of the contracts that we are getting ready to push through. We have about 25 new agreements using our federal and state dollars for fiscal year 2020 that are getting ready to hit the streets. So that includes our public service agreements, our public facility construction upgrade agreements, as well as our homeless services through THHI, those agreements. We have a new agreement with Habitat for Humanity that we're getting ready to do, as well as we're doing an agreement with DACO to improve 10 of their multifamily units so that their residents, I think they're also partnering with Metropolitan Ministries to have 10 additional units to update so that they can live on their campus. Diana Gardens, as I mentioned, will be opening soon. We also had a wonderful ribbon cutting with UACDC this month, so we congratulate them on their Harvest Hope Park, as well as we had a groundbreaking for enterprising Latinas in the Waimama Opportunity Area. We're helping them update their buildings so that they can provide additional services. So if there are any questions on those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.
One of the reasons I really like having this, it does help not only our viewing public, but also us recognize the number of projects that are in the queue, and there's lots of them. On a regular basis, the staff does an amazing job, and I just want to say thank you for that. Federal and local grants. In your package is a list of grant updates that we receive, actually from a variety of services. Congresswoman Castor sends me an update, and Senator Rubio's office also sends an update, so we want to make sure that those are available. They can be found online, but there's a lot of good information for those that are interested in working outside of the scope of affordable housing, but in concert be able to address those issues. And you have the monthly newsletter?
Yes, we have our monthly newsletter, and we are featuring none other than our Sable Place.
Hey.
So Sean is out there, and this is a project with Metropolitan Ministries. It's 112 affordable apartment units, and I want to say $1 million of Hope Affordable Housing funding was put towards this project. So $1.1 million total, but $1 million of this funding was put towards that project. 70% of the units are set aside for people emerging out of homelessness. So our commitment to serving the very low income is not diminishing. You see it in our contracts. For our contracts that move forward, 10% of the units that are developed are set aside for people emerging out of homelessness. The state is mirroring our efforts now. We're not mirroring the state's efforts. We were already doing this. And so I want to say, in some areas, we are front runners. And so this is not just our struggle, it's a national struggle. But I am proud of the body of work that's being done here. So certainly thankful for the Hope Group that's out there, Habitat for Humanity, Blue Sky. I see some other developers and people are interested in doing affordable housing. I want to thank you for your interest and your efforts as well. You know, the community advocates, I think it's important to kind of keep this on the radar. Sarah Combs, we had HUD out there to the Sarah Combs groundbreaking. If you get a chance, please go because it's not right. Yeah. Well, you know, she is the visionary because this is not just about a housing unit, but this is about our communities and what our communities are going to look like, not 6 months from now or next year, but, you know, 10 or 20 years from now, too. So you guys make a tremendous difference. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. I just have one item under new business. Our next meeting is January 13. I believe the Florida legislature opens on the 14th or the 15th. So we will have a robust conversation about who you're going to call to make sure that you address those issues as it pertains to not only the Stowski Trust, but other opportunities for improving access to shelter, whether that be housing, affordable housing, transit, any of those initiatives. So I will bring a laundry list of items that we can make phone calls to our legislature at the next meeting. Any other items that we need to, as far as new business is concerned?
Motion received and filed.
All right, thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays,
Yes,
everyone.
happy
Thank you so
holidays.
much.
Finish one, jump